I think for me, yeah, I kind of, struggled with my emotions my whole, like I've always been like a very like emotional person, like very strong emotions, a lot of anger, reactivity. Um, yeah, and I kind of, I guess I just started to notice that more and more, and like that I didn't want to be that way. I didn't want to be reactive. I didn't want to
Yeah.
let my anger consume me. You know, and just I remember like I don't know what it was. I guess it was just unconscious process that was there, and then it bubbled up, and eventually I was like, yeah, I want to meditate. Like I want to do something to calm my mind down. And I started with Headspace. I started with, they had it was like 10 days, a 10-minute meditation for free.
Me too. That's funny.
Yeah. And I just started with that. I did 10 days and I just never looked back. From there, I just started upping my time. And eventually I did twice a day. I did like the TM. I've tried all kinds of stuff. But yeah, it was just like, just going deeper and deeper and increasing my meditation time. Um, and then kind of that later on, that's when I kind of went into psychedelics. And that really, like those experiences, I think really, really put the rocket fuel into my practice, because that's what I kind of saw
hmm
what's what's beyond. I kind of saw like, okay, I can see where this can go. Whereas before psychedelics, you don't really know like what could be possible. At least that's how it was for me. It was just like, just sitting down and uh, just just being there and calm. And there was like a sense of calm, but there wasn't like a mystical breakthrough or these non-dual experiences that have been just shatter reality or conceptions of reality and what is possible. And that kind of really motivated me, like, okay, now I'm going to take my meditation practice, like I'm going to be more diligent with it than I even was before.
hmm Yeah, same with me. I think meditation lays a good groundwork for using psychedelics. It's like lays the foundation for your mind to be able to go to those certain headspaces, no pun intended, and be able to like handle it better, to be able to kind of integrate it better in your being. And I think it's almost necessary. I think they complement each other if you use them in the right way. What did they do for you? Like, what did psychedelics show you, if you can kind of describe it?
Yeah, so I mean, it's crazy because like for a while I was saw myself as kind of like a psychedelic advocate, because that's how transformative psychedelics were for in my life. And I did mushrooms when I was like 18 for the first time, and and the way that I did it was terrible. Like I broke all the rules of setting, dose. Like those are the three main things.
hmm
Set being your mindset, setting being where you do it, and dose being how much you take. And I did it with like a friend that I knew from back in the day, and like I haven't seen him in a long time. We were supposed to drink. We had like a bottle of vodka. We had some weed. We were gonna smoke and drink, and then next thing you know, we go to NYU dorms, and his friends were like, "Oh, we're gonna take," and I didn't know any of these kids. Oh, we're gonna take mushrooms, and I'm like, I'm not doing this. Like, I'm good. I'm just gonna drink and smoke. You guys do mushrooms, and then last minute, I ended up doing it, and wow, it was wild, and it was just way too much, because I think we
Yeah.
took like an eighth each, and
hmm
then we had another eight that we split amongst us, and then we were smoking blunts, which
hmm
like that's not something that I ever did. Really, like that's not something that once I really got into conscious psychedelic use, that's what I call it, conscious psychedelic use. I never would mix weed with the psychedelics, but at that point it was just super overwhelming, and like I got really paranoid, and it was like a quote unquote bad trip.
Yeah.
But when I came out of it, I was like, oh, like when it started to wear off, I'm like, oh, this shit just fucks with your mind. Like this is all like it's just a trip. And I don't know how that affected me, but I'm sure that just that experience did something. It shifted me somehow that probably changed the trajectory of my life. But it
Yeah.
was only later on, I think, that was kind of my initial like doing mushrooms. And then I did maybe mushrooms like one more time when I was like 24, like a little while afterwards with a couple of my close friends. But once again, this is before I really understood how to use them in a conscious way. And it was more just like recreational. It was later on that this was kind of when I was going through, you could say like a identity existential crisis thing. And I went on this retreat. I actually had kind of like, he was kind of like an unofficial mentor to me, but he used to be my jiu-jitsu teacher for a little while. And then he moved to Costa Rica and he had this little retreat, this like personal growth retreat. And I came out there and it was a great retreat. It was really impactful, but you know, I know he was using at that time, he was using a lot of ayahuasca. He was doing these ceremonies. And according to him, it was like transforming his life. So I was just, you know, and the way he was explaining, he was like, oh, listen, like you basically drink this stuff and it tells you what you need to do in your life. You go and do it, and then you drink it again, and it tells you what you know what to do. And it's just like you're just constantly leveling up. And that's kind of how he framed it. And at that point, I'm like, oh, I want to level up, I want to do better, I want to do all these things. And he kind of like, I basically ended up getting the contact. He put me in contact with a shaman. She ended up hitting me up, and yeah, like when I ended up, you know, speaking to her, and she kind of made sure everything was good. And she told me, she's like, listen, come, this is when we're doing it. It's 2 days. He's like, I recommend you do two nights. And those 2 nights of doing the ayahuasca and being in that ceremony, in that space, how the shaman, who like I still have like a very close relationship, I feel like to this day, like the way she held that space and being with that medicine and using it. And I've never experienced anything like that, because before then, it's like I've only been in spaces where everybody was like puffing their ego up, and it was like, you know, it was just like, that's how it was kind of for me growing up in Brooklyn, like everybody just flexing on everybody else. And you know, just wearing a very, you know, strong ego and a very strong mask, and not showing your vulnerabilities to other people. But being in this space was completely different. You know, just the medicine just dissolves your ego. So I just had this very like unity, wholeness experience. Was very healing and very transformational. And then also like the sharing you do afterwards, after you do it, talking to other people. It was just like I didn't never connected on that kind of level. And I'd never been in a space like that. And like now in retrospect, I see that those kind of spaces, they actually transform your consciousness, even if it's temporary. Like you go into an environment like that and you're actually the better version of yourself. And then you go back home and you kind of regress a little bit. Like you slump down more to your baseline. But being in these kind of environments, they kind of start uplifting your consciousness. And if you could actually create that kind of environment back home with your friends and with your family, and the more you could kind of integrate that into your daily life, I feel like it becomes that kind of environment where you're constantly elevating your consciousness.
Yeah, it seems like that's what is the goal of these psychedelic experiences, is to take these crazy mystical places that we go to, I guess you could say, and then bring it back home, like you said, to be able to still build here and build your life here. Because it's cool to be able to go to a psychedelic retreat, but you gotta come home. We always come back. You always come down. So I think the true purpose of using psychedelics is to, yeah, tap into the higher parts of our being. But then also, what are you gonna do with that? Like, what are you gonna do with these insights in different perspectives on life, right? How did you change from before these psychedelic experiences to after?
Yeah, so there was actually something else that you were saying about taking the like insights and taking the experiences and integrating them into our
Mm-hmm.
daily life. And so that was really I think the challenge. And you know, when I first was coming across these things and having these experiences, like I was just an advocate. I'm like, everybody should do this. Everything is going to transform your life.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways it did transform my life. And specifically, I used something called 5-MeO. This was after my ayahuasca experiences. Like I already did the ayahuasca and I was doing mushrooms, and it was just like there was like kind of like this psychedelic phase that I was having in my life where I was just really into using these medicines. And I wasn't using them like all the time. It would be like, you know, a couple of months at least that would have to pass, or 6 months. But there was like several years where I was really into them. And it's when I ran across 5-MeO DMT, toad venom.
Hmm.
And yeah, I actually have a video on my channel about that, using that, my experience with that. And that completely changed everything. Like it's kind of like you know, after death before Christ. It was like there was life before toad and there was life after toad. And the way I would really say it is like, I can't explain that, you know, I speak about it in that video, but to me, that experience was like, that was the true self experience. It was just, there's no other way to frame it than like, that was an experience of God. It was a completely ego dissolving mystical experience. And it was completely terrifying. It was the most terrifying thing ever that I've ever faced. But just going through that and seeing what lies behind the ego, like what
Hmm.
lies beyond the ego, because I've never had something like, even in my other psychedelic experience, I never had this complete ego dissolution. And that's what it was a complete ego dissolution. So after that, I could not look at life the same. I could not live in the same way. After that, it was like a no going back. That's when, at that, after those experiences, I was like, okay, I have to meditate. Like I have to get deeper into this. I have to go deeper with my meditation practice. And it just transformed everything. Like just everything became kind of like magical in a way. Like there was this sense
Hmm.
of that, and there was definitely an afterglow to it. But then there was also the struggle, because it was like a taste of something like that. It was a taste of something that was so sacred, so divine. And then it was coming back to the ego and coming back to relative reality and having to function and having this experience. Like, how do I fit this experience into my daily life? And that's been an ongoing process. It's
Yeah.
been like, you know, it's just been something that I constantly have to work with and constantly have to integrate. And that's why I kind of fell back from being like this advocate of telling people to do it or not do it, psychedelics, do it or not do it. But it's just, if you run across it, there's going to be a lot of beautiful openings potentially, but there's also going to be a lot of challenges.
Hmm.
There's been a lot of loneliness because of that too, because I would have these experiences and then I don't like, I don't know if it's like a religious impulse, but it's wanting to tie that back to the community and tie it back to other people that I'm around. And that's been challenging to do. And then also tasting that kind of like love. That's what it was. It's just an experience. Like this is what life is really all about. It's about love. Like that's all
Yeah.
it's about. It's not
Hmm.
about, you know, getting anywhere or stepping on somebody's toes or climbing a ladder.
Yep.
But then you come back into relative reality, and that's how people live. And there's all this wiring in our minds that pulls us into that way of being. So how am I going to be, how am I going to show up in this world and still hold that in my mind? Like, oh, it's really all about love. That's what really, really matters. So how can I get the work done? How can I do the things that I need to do while holding that perspective?